Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. NRG's problems seem to be continuing with the scrim that got leaked last night against the Cubit Academy. It does not look to be going especially well. They have a big game against MIBO in the next couple of days. That will effectively determine whether they get through to the playoffs or whether they do not. And on this evidence, it's not looking good for a team that was trying to win events during the course of this season. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. Thanks for all the new support over the last few days as well. Let's get straight into things really with what's going on in the Pacific, because yesterday was a big game between T1 and Team Secret. Team Secret is such a strange team because they're not good, but somehow they always find a way to at least be competitive with the top team at some point. This final shot from Buzz was pretty disgusting as well, but T1 did eventually take the series against Team Secret. It got kind of interesting. The game to Icebox was, actually went Team Secret's way, so that was pretty cool to see, but the Lotus was a pretty rough time, and this was really just a duelist diff here between Jeremy and Buzz. Buzz goes 30 and 13 on the Rays. Jeremy goes, he really had just no impact on the Rays at all here this map. So that was kind of the difference maker in the end, certainly on the defensive side when T1 just bowled them over on the attack. Buzz had a pretty mega series, and T1 take the victory. Now, DRX took down Global Esports 2. This was a 2-0, a very clean one. Worth noting, however, Bayan was out of the team for this series. Estrella was in. So I find it really interesting, these teams that are coming up with these six-man rosters right now. Not to say that they're going to, not change back. They may well decide to do that. This was maybe a good opportunity for DRX to try something out. But, Estrella stepped in, played the Vise on the game 1, played the Omen on the game 2, and actually had a really good series. And they ended up winning 13-3, 13-10. It was pretty dominant in favour of DRX. So, what are they going to do, right? Is Bayan going to come back? Is this a change that they've looked to make? Because they brought Estrella into their team recently. They've now got this six-man roster, so look, it gives them options, sure, but obviously after bombing out of Bangkok, they've looked pretty good. They took down Paper X, they beat DFN, they've now beat Global Esports, so they obviously got some big games upcoming. Their next big game really is against Boom, so that to me is pretty interesting, pretty telling where that goes for DRX, but yeah, they're looking kind of as you'd expect them to look, but I like the idea of trying something to get better. I think where DRX were, not an issue to me to pick up somebody else and, bring back a player like Estrella, but yeah, is he going to stay? Is Bayan going to come back in? Is this the new team of 5? I guess time will tell, but I wouldn't be surprised if they stuck with this move at all. Speaking of six-man teams, this is another one. Trace Esports, they've signed MIDI onto their roster, and Trace are looking, well, they made it to Bangkok, right? Let's not forget, they lost to T1 in the end. They didn't even, they looked pretty bad there compared to how they looked in the Chinese region, and to be fair, so far, this stage, they've not looked great, but, they've now got a six-man team as well, so it's all going on, to be honest. They played G-Light Gaming and went down just the other day, and this is how things there look over in the Chinese region. Trace Esports 2-2, they're 4th in the stage, so in their group, it could be worse, but it certainly could be better. Just before we go on to the Americas, well, speaking of the Americas really, but the Latin American side, we've got to talk about this team, Ixolos Laser, because these guys, we've talked about them probably for a couple of months now, because they've been known by many of the North American teams as an incredibly competent scrim partner. They are, teams in North America love to scrim these guys because they're not playing them in the Pro League, obviously, maybe not yet. We'll talk about Ascension here in a second, but these guys are very, very competitive with lots of talent, and they know how to play good Valorant. So, yeah, it's a really interesting team. They've got some players that have been around a long time. They've got some up-and-coming talents too. But if you look at their recent matches, you have to go back a long way to find anything they actually lost. Certainly since, November? Basically since this new run to the season has started. They've not lost anything since November. Okay, they've occasionally lost maps. And, okay, they're obviously not playing teams in the Pro League, but still, in their region, they are crushing it, and they've beaten everyone without too much difficulty now for a very long period of time indeed, 2-0ing all sorts of teams all of the time, and it's a pretty common occurrence that they'll deliver and deliver again. So, are they a threat for Ascension? The answer is absolutely yes. You've got to wonder how it's going to go this year, Ascension, because M80 are putting out all the stops to try and win. They've brought in Victor now. They've brought in Chet as their coach, an additional coach on the team as well. They're trying to win it for the 3rd year in a row. They've fallen short in heartbreaking fashion the last couple of times. Is this going to be a similar time where M80, you know, maybe they make it all the way and then when it really matters, it doesn't work out because a team like Laser, they get the job done. So speaking of teams, though, that could go down, 2G, of course, they're not looking like they're going to be able to maintain their spot, right? Because nowadays, if you don't qualify for the World Championship or if you don't finish particularly well in your region, then you will be axed out of the Pro League as one of the guest teams. But there has been a lot of questions, let's say, on FURIA, because I think it's 2027 for the 27 season when Riot are intending to reconsider the franchise agreements, or technically the partnership agreements, of course, right? Now, FURIA have been in a bit of a shambles for some time now. There was even an article that came out yesterday that said Zand, who of course was there before, he was making it clear that he doesn't believe that those in charge really know what they're doing. And these problems have been now pretty persistent, and it's clearly affecting their Valorant team as well. I think also for FURIA, they played 2 games, one against, Cloud9, one against MIBR. I don't even think it really matters how well they perform in those 2 series. I think regardless, they are, I mean, obviously they're not going to make it to the playoffs, but I think it might already mathematically be over for FURIA as it stands. So there were lots of questions as to whether, because G2, let's not forget, guys, like G2 is a guest team. They are not a franchise partner team. If they don't finish out this year strongly, you know, they could be relegated out of the league again, which they obviously want to make sure does not happen. But, I mean, you've got to think that G2 should be given the full-time partnership spot. It only makes sense right now. And if that was to happen, then somebody would have to be revoked. So that's where some of the questions have been raised over the last few days. I mean, actually, yeah, Mr. Funhaver says it last night. Should we make FURIA get a competitive roster or give their permanent spot to G2 at the end of the year? And, you know, that's what I find pretty interesting. And yeah, I actually forgot about this. Their only win this year was not with their roster. You guys remember when they had the issues with the visas and they had to play 2G with a full North American team with Penny, B-Dog, Jake, Stella, and Ada, and then they actually won the series. And since then, it's been obviously an absolute disaster, even losing to the likes of NRG. But speaking of NRG, this is how things sit over there. Just wanted to share this and no names available so you guys can look through to find your favorite team and understand what they have to do to make sure they make it to the playoffs. Of course, just making it to the playoffs is not the be-all, end-all. You want to get a good seed if you can for the playoffs. But this is what the guys have to say. So, Crew Esports, winning the next game against EG guarantees Crew in top 2, whatever happens next. For 100T, if they beat 2G, they qualify. If they want to get first, they need to go 2-0 and hope the Crew go 0-2. But realistically, it's just about getting to the playoffs for a lot of these teams. Sentinels, if they beat Loud, they should have no difficulties there. 2G, it's pretty rough for them to make it through. And yeah, apparently Loud, I mean, obviously Loud, they looked better with Luxo, but they're still in a bit of a tough spot. They've got to beat Sentinels and EG, and they need 2G to lose both their games, and EG has to lose to Crew. So that's pretty tough to make it work for them. EG, they have to beat one of Crew or Loud in their final couple of games to contest the full spot, but it does depend a bit on the results elsewhere. This is interesting, though, in the second group, because really it comes down to between NRG and Lev, and they've got other games to play as well, but apparently it doesn't really matter what happens elsewhere. All that matters is that NRG play Lev, and whoever wins qualifies. Basically, that's how it looks right now. Because let's say NRG lose to MIBR, and let's say Lev even beats G2, which is unlikely, but let's say they do, then Lev will be 2-2, NRG will be 1-3, but if NRG were to beat Lev, then it's 2-3, 2-3, but NRG were to win the tiebreaker, right? So, you know, the other, what really matters is that final series. That is almost certain to determine the final team that makes it through to the playoffs in the Group Omega side. So that's pretty fascinating. But how are NRG going to get on? Are they going to be able to win it? Because they were expected to be a real force, I would say, this season. They made roster changes with that in mind. Of course, it's been pretty controversial in recent couple of years. Chet was gone. They brought in Verno. They brought in Bonka. I think many, including myself, were pretty excited about the development of that team. I wasn't convinced that the whole Brock for Verno idea, like, getting rid of Verno, I get it, because clearly things internally weren't great, and a decision had to be made as to whether you're going to stick with Verno or whether you're going to stick with FNS. That was my read on it anyway. The Brock replacement was, you know, I feel like they could have maybe gone a different direction with that. And Chet did confirm just on the M80 side, because there was a rumor that he was maybe going to join M80 anyway, but Chet says, no, I was not going to be the M80 coach before the start of the season, then I got banned. He says that, you know, apparently it's only a relatively new thing that's happened. But anyway, Chet is back regardless. It's been a rumor now for a couple of days that it was going to happen, and it was officially confirmed, of course, a couple of days ago. But let's talk about some of these scrim bucks, right? Because NRG, like, they've invested a lot into this team. FNS, it's the farewell tour, it's his final year as a team. Of course, they've got Marder there, they've got Ethan there, they've got what should be on paper be a pretty damn good roster, and they weren't looking bad at all in the off-season either. But they come into the year and it's not been looking very good for them by any means, and the scrim bucks continue in that way. So Team Liquid, they were 15-8 up on Giant X. That was spotted yesterday. Sentinels were playing SRB, and this was, you know, 7-7, 7-7, 7-6, right? As you guys can see, it's just switching over. That, of course, is, you know, the SR Black team with BCJ and the guys over there. It's a pretty solid squad at that. We had 100T playing somebody or another. 7-9 down they were here. EG were 10-5 up on some other team. But this was the notable one that caused a lot of the, well, it got the most likes, let's say, on Twitter last night, was Qubit Academy versus NRG, right? So Qubit have been good. Like, they're obviously a good academy team. They've got lots of prospects, but they're not, like, the best in challenges right now. They didn't win the most recent playoffs. You know, people would probably put SRB and Rankers and M80 and, you know, maybe a couple of other teams up there and in the mix as well. So, you know, they're not quite pro level, obviously, and they're not quite top of challengers level right now. They're good. They've got great talents. They're probably a very good scrim team, but they're not necessarily the best. And NRG at this point were down 12-3. And 12-3, that's a big enough sample size in a map to say, yeah, it ain't looking that good in this moment for NRG. So I think it's a fair conclusion to take away from this and say, NRG are in a bit of a predicament right now, to say the very least. And as I say, what happens in the next couple of days against MIBR, I mean, they're obviously expected to lose to MIBR right now, especially when Verno is there. And Verno, you know, trying to get the revenge on his former teammates, like, would be an insane story. But he also went on to say in this article here that he does believe those guys can be the best if they keep improving. But as I say, the reality is it maybe doesn't matter too much what happens there, because G2, C9, MIBR should be qualifying regardless. It's all about that NRG Lev game on the final day, which is going to determine everything in terms of whether NRG need to just disband, basically, or whether they're going to still have a chance. So very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.